Guten Tag, Damen und Herren und Kinder. Ich heiße Johannes Kranich. My name is Johannes Kranich. You may call me Johannes. And I am here today to practice the art of storytelling for your benefit. Now, the art of storytelling is not something that you see so much anymore, at least not except for children. Parents are always telling stories to children. But in my time, which is the year 1528, people tell stories all the time, whether it's to teach a lesson or it's to pass the time. It's not just for children. And, and by that I mean also that sometimes the stories are very inappropriate for children to hear. They may contain sex or violence or all sorts of terrible things that happen. They may just be too scary. But people told stories all the time. Today, I would like to tell you a few stories. My mother-in-law is a great storyteller and is a talent that I am very envious of, and so I hope that you will join me for this story that I will tell you. My favorite stories are about a man called Till Eulenspiegel. Now, Till is a trickster, a prankster. He does things to people to take them down a notch. In this, what his jokes are, and so he travels all through Europe, even going to see the Pope, and he plays tricks on people and just does things that are very, say, inappropriate, perhaps. Now, when people tell stories, many times, very few times do they come from a book. Most times, the people in my time telling stories is just were person to person. There is no book involved. So stories vary from the person who tells them. And if you hear a story and you want to tell it again, you may not remember any details, or you may just fill in your own details to fit the situation. So they're usually not always going to be the same. In this instance, I'm first going to tell a little bit of the story from the book that I have right here, Till Eulenspiegel, in the classics, because I want to properly introduce the character and tell a little bit about his youth and when he is born and baptized and how he sort of starts off in his beginnings. So, the first story I have here is how Till Eulenspiegel was born, how he was baptized 3 times in one day, and who his godparents were. Now, Eulenspiegel was born near a forest called the Elm, in the district of Saxony, in the village of Kneitlingen. His father was named Klaus Eulenspiegel, and his mother was Anna Weibeken. Well, she had been recovering from childbirth, and she sent the child to Ampleben, to the village, for baptism, and had it named Till Eulenspiegel, with Till after a citizen of Ampleben who had become his godfather. Now, Ampleben is a castle that was destroyed as a wicked thieves' castle by Magdeburg with the help of other principalities, somewhere more than 50 years ago. The church and the abbot and the village nearby were now in the charge of the worthy abbot Arnulf Pfaffenmeister of St. Ageden. Well, Eulenspiegel was baptized, and they were ready to carry the child back to Nightligan with a godmother who was carrying him, decided to cross a narrow bridge that lies between Kneitlingen and Ampleben. Well, they had drunk too many beers after the child's baptism, for the custom there was to bring the child into the tavern after the baptism and have a good time toasting it. The child's father is supposed to pay for this. Well, the godmother fell into the water and muddied herself and the child so completely that the child almost suffocated. Well, so the other women in the village helped the godmother out with the child and went home to the village. They washed the child in the kettle and made it neat and clean again. And thus was Eulenspiegel baptized 3 times in one day, once in his baptism, once in a puddle, and once in a kettle of warm water. So there we are. Very simple. Now, a little bit later in time, we learn about how all the farmers and their wives complained about young Eulenspiegel, saying he was a rogue and a scoundrel, and how he rode behind his father on a horse, very quietly letting the people behind him see his ass. Yes, this is the kind of child. Maybe you know children like this. As soon as Eulenspiegel was old enough to walk and stand, he played lots of games with the young children. Like a monkey, he tumbled and lay about on the pillows and in the grass till he was about 3 years old. Then he began to apply himself to all sorts of mischief. So all the neighbors complained together to Mr. Eulenspiegel that his son Till Eulenspiegel was a rascal. Well, the father went to his son and he said, "Why are our neighbors saying you are a rogue?" Eulenspiegel said, "My dear father, I know nothing about this. I do nothing to anyone. I will easily prove this to you. Go, mount on your horse, and I will sit behind you and keep quiet, and ride with you to the lanes, and they will still lie about me and say what they please. You should notice this." So the father did this. He put his son behind him on the horse. Now, Eulenspiegel, riding behind his father, lifted up his behind and showed him his butt, and let all the people look at his ass, as then sat back down again. So the neighbors and their wives pointed to him and they say, "Fie on you! See what a rogue he is." So Eulenspiegel says, "Father, you see well enough that I keep quiet and I do nothing to anyone. Even so, they say I am a rogue." So the father tried one thing else, seating Eulenspiegel, his dear son, in front of him on the horse. Eulenspiegel now sat still, but he opened his mouth widely and grinned at the farmers and stuck out his tongue. This time the people ran over and said, look what a rascal he is." But his father said, "You were clearly born on an unlucky hour. You sit still, you keep quiet, you do nothing to anybody, and still the people say you are a rascal." So the father left that place, and he moved the whole family into the district of Magdeburg on the Saal, from where Eulenspiegel's mother came from. Well, soon afterward, old Klaus Eulenspiegel died, and the mother had to take care of the son. Well, the mother was poor, and Eulenspiegel had no desire to learn a trade, so he grew to be about 16 years old there, amusing himself and performing lots of ridiculous tricks. So, obviously, you can see Eulenspiegel is a bit of a problem child. I'd perhaps tell you just a little bit more about this. So, here we have how Klaus Eulenspiegel moved away from Kneitlingen to the Saale, and the river where his mother was born, and then where he died, and how his son Till learned to walk on the tightrope. Eulenspiegel's mother lived in a house, and its country yard lay down to the river called the Saal. Well, Eulenspiegel began to walk a tightrope, doing so on lattice work of the house, because he did not want his mother to see it. She did not tolerate this foolishness of his when he would play on the rope, and she threatened to beat him for it. Once she found him on the rope, and she got a large club and tried to shove him off. So he ran away from her, out through a window, sitting up on the roof, where she could not get to him. And this held him till he got a little bit older. Then he began to perform the rope trick again, stretching the rope across the river from the back of his mother's house to the house on the other side. But lots of young people and old people, seeing that the rope was going up and seeing that Eulenspiegel was going to perform a trick, they came to watch him. For they were very curious about what sort of thing he might do to demonstrate this jest that he's attempting to pull off. Eulenspiegel was sitting on the rope, doing his best performance, when his mother came outside, and she crept up secretly back into the house and got up to the lattice work where the rope was, and she cut the rope in two, right there on her son. So Eulenspiegel fell into the river amid much derision and taking a bath. The farmers also roared with laughter, and the young boys yelled at him, "Ha ha, have a good bath," and so on. This annoyed him so much, he paid no attention to them. But in his mind, he was thinking how he could get back at them for laughing at him. Which brings us to the next story, which is how Eulenspiegel relieved the boys of 200 pairs of shoes, over which they fought, making young and old tear their hair over them. So, after this last trick, where he got laughed at, Eulenspiegel decided to have his revenge. He stretched the rope across from his house over the river, and let the people know that he planned on walking on the rope. The crowd, young and old, gathered. Eulenspiegel told the boys that each one should give him his left shoe, and he planned to show them a fine trick on the rope with their shoes. And then the boys believed it, and so all of them, even the old men, gave him their left shoe. They started walking, so the boys started taking off their shoes and giving them to him. And when there were about 2 equal piles from the boys, that is twice 60, half the shoes went with Eulenspiegel. And he tied them onto a string, climbing up onto the rope. And when he was on the rope and he had the shoes with him, the old men and the boys, they looked up at him, for they thought that he was going to perform some amazing trick. And what he did was, he sat there and he yelled down to them. He said, "Everybody look out," and everybody hunt for their own shoe again. And he sliced the string in two and tossed all the shoes down on the ground. The boys and the old men rushed over to them. Well, one found his shoe here, another there, and then one said, "This is my shoe." And there's what, "You're lying, it's my shoe." And so they grabbed one another by the hair and began beating each other. One lay on the ground, one was on top of him, one screamed, another wept, the third left. Well, it went on like this till the old men got into face slapping and pulling each other's hair. And Eulenspiegel was just sitting up there on his rope laughing. He says, "Now look for your shoes, the way I had to finish my bath." Then he ran off of his rope and he left the old men and the boys to themselves. But after that, because of this trick, he just stayed at home with his mother to mend shoes, interestingly enough. This made his mother very happy because she thought that maybe now he was going to become serious about learning a trade. But she didn't know that he had already made a big fool out of himself when he was staying home so that he didn't get beaten when he went out. And Eulenspiegel never really did learn a trade. He just decided that he was going to go and be a fool, which, as I said, is good for us because there are lots of stories to tell about him. So I move on to a story that I sort of know by heart now. I tell you about this, and that is one time that Eulenspiegel was apprenticed as a baker, and he made owls and long-tailed monkeys. So what happens is Eulenspiegel is in Brunswick, and while he is in Brunswick, he comes across he's wandering around doing nothing. There's a baker standing there. He's leaning out his window, and he calls out to Eulenspiegel, who is just standing there, and he goes, "What?" He goes, "Are you, what is it that you do?" He says to the Eulenspiegel. Eulenspiegel says, "Well, I'm a baker's apprentice." He says, "But I don't have a master right now." He says, "Well, funny story," he says to Eulenspiegel. He says, "I need a baker's boy, so you come work for me." So he works with him for a few days. After he gets him situated, figures out how to do it again, gets used to the way that the man is doing things, he says, "All right." He goes, "I am going home to bed. You are going to make the dough for the bread, and bake that for tomorrow." Eulenspiegel goes, "Well, okay," he says, "but what is it that I should make? Tell me, boss, what do you want me to do with this dough when I make it?" And the baker, kind of annoyed with Eulenspiegel, but also half joking, he says, "Well, I don't know." He goes, "Make owls and long-tailed monkeys for all I care." He just assumes Eulenspiegel is being a bit of a smartass or something. What he doesn't realize is Eulenspiegel says, "Owls and long-tailed monkeys, all right." The baker goes home, he goes to bed. Eulenspiegel gets the dough, he makes the dough, and there he forms owls and long-tailed monkeys. So when the baker shows up the next day, all over the surfaces that normally should have loaves of bread, there are owls and long-tailed monkeys. The baker is furious. He says, "What am I going to do with these? What did you do?" And Eulenspiegel goes, I just did what you told me. You said make owls and long-tailed monkeys, and I did." He goes, "I can't sell this." "Get out," he says. "Get out of here right now." And Eulenspiegel says, "And you'll have to pay for the dough that you wasted." Eulenspiegel says, "Okay, well, I'll pay for the dough, but then I want to take them with me, but you're making me pay for them." The baker was just like, "Fine, just take them, just get out of my sight." So Eulenspiegel leaves, and he has his basket full of bread, owls, and long-tailed monkeys. Now, normally, perhaps you couldn't do anything with this, but this was right before the feast of St. Nicholas. So what Eulenspiegel does is he takes his owls and long-tailed monkeys and he goes into the market square and he sells them, and they are a great hit. And he sells them for much more than what he pays for the dough. He's ahead. Now, the baker hears about what's going on. He hears Eulenspiegel selling these and he says, oh, that scoundrel. He goes, I should have charged him for the firewood and to use the oven. And so he charges off across the square until he reaches where Eulenspiegel was. But by then, Eulenspiegel is gone. And he never manages to recover his monies. And now, another story about Mr. Eulenspiegel. Till Eulenspiegel later becomes one of his many jobs in Nuremberg. He becomes a sexton. So he works at the church, he cleans up, he helps the priest put on the garments and things like that. He works around the church. He is a lay person and not religious person, no, not a priest or something like that. And one day, when he is working for this priest, he's helping the priest put on his vestments. Well, while he's down there, he sort of kneels down and he's straightening the priest's chasuble, making sure it fit on him very well. And the priest farts in his face. And Eulenspiegel says, really? This is what you do in the house of God. You fart, and not only just fart, but fart in my face. The priest says, this is my church. I can do whatever I want. What I want to do, I could go and take a shit in the middle of this church if I wanted to. And Eulenspiegel looks at the priest and he says, I bet you a barrel of beer that you will not. The priest says, you're on. So the priest goes out into the church, proper. When he squats down, takes a big shit. Now, the priest says, I win, you owe me a barrel of beer. Eulenspiegel says, wait. We have to make sure that it is in the middle of the church. And so then they measure it. Typical German efficiency. And they measure it. And they find out that the shit is not in the middle of the church. It's more toward the front. And so Eulenspiegel wins the barrel of beer because the priest was off target. Now, while he is being a sacristan, when it is coming up to Easter, much like we are coming up to right here now, and they are going to do the Easter play. Very common in Europe. They have the Passion, and then the Crucifixion and the Resurrection, and they have a big play. Now, all of the parts, even the female ones, are usually acted out by men. Now, in this case, the three Marys who come to the tomb, they are going to be played by three farmers. And the angel, in this case, is going to, at the tomb, when the Marys get there, it's going to be played by the priest's maid, who is an old lady of Isfanai. But she has been with the priest forever, and she's been helping with the plays forever, and she actually knows the lines in the Latin. And the sacristan, who is Eulenspiegel, has to go, and his job is to deal with the farmers, and he has to teach them their lines, because even though nobody really speaks Latin, the play is going to be in Latin. The farmers learn their lines from Eulenspiegel. Never have any idea. I mean, they have a general idea of what they're saying, but they don't really know. So when it comes time for the play, Eulenspiegel they gets everybody ready, and the maid steps out of her little fake tomb, and she says, as the angel, she says, "Quem queritis," which is, "Whom do you seek here?" The farmer, playing the first Mary, replies with the words that Eulenspiegel told him. And in Latin, what he actually says is, "We are looking for the priest's old one-eyed whore." Well, the maid knew that the farmer didn't know what these words were. And so she knew that Eulenspiegel was responsible for this. So she lunges out of the tomb, trying to punch Eulenspiegel. But she winds up hitting one of the farmers. And the farmer, or the other farmers with the three Marys, realize see that the priest, rather the maid, is attacking his friend. So they jump in on the fight to defend their friend. And then the priest, seeing that the maid is being attacked, he jumps in as well. And they are beating each other up and kicking, and they manage to kick the wings off the angel, and they are fighting, and this whole mess right here. And in the meantime, Eulenspiegel makes his escape out the back of the church, and by the time that the whole thing is settled, Eulenspiegel is nowhere to be seen. Gone. So these are the kind of trouble that you get into if you are Till Eulenspiegel. So that is going to be the whole deal with Till Eulenspiegel for today.